The Joe Rogan Experience.
Is there any evolutionary benefit to narcissism? Like, where does that come from? Because does it exist in the animal kingdom?
Yes. So if you think about it from an evolutionary perspective, which some people have, narcissism seems to be really good for short-term mating success. Like if I go to a bar in downtown Austin and I give narcissism questionnaires to all the dudes there, the higher scores are going to get the most numbers over time. That's usually what happens. So narcissism is usually good for short-term mating, and it's good for status seeking, power seeking. So it's probably beneficial in those contexts. And this is where it gets a little weird, because in stable environments, like on research in hunter-gatherer societies, in stable environments, if somebody's cheating on other people's wives or stealing stuff or steals extra food, people don't like that. They'll just kill them. I mean, they'll just go have a hunting accident. If you're kind of the dick in the hunter-gatherer society, they'll take you out and you just won't come back because they just don't want you.
Right.
But so narcissism gets weeded out in those places. But when things get unstable and things are uncertain, people who are narcissistic can get a lot of resources and do really well. So sometimes they do well, which keeps it around. And obviously in big societies, you can become powerful enough to hire henchmen and hire a PR agent, and you can kind of build your own status and do a lot more than you can in a hunter-gatherer group where everyone knows you.
What is narcissism when you define it? Like, what is your definition of narcissism?
So it gets a little more complicated. When we're talking like this, I'm talking about grandiose narcissism, and that's a basic
There's
trait.
more than one kind of
narcissism.
narcissism.
Yeah, I'll step back. So when we talk about narcissism, in the psychological literature, we're talking about three different things that are related. The first of these is narcissistic personality, and this is a trait, and meaning that people go from a high level to a low level. It's not a clinical disorder. And in this trait, when it's grandiose, we say grandiose narcissism, it's this combination of sense of entitlement and a sense of superiority, but also you get extroversion and drive and ambition. Call it agentic extroversion. So somebody who's driven and extroverted, but also a little bit self-centered and antagonistic and entitled. So that combination of traits, kind of a prima donna or, overconfident or cocky or whatever you want to call it, that's what we talk about is grandiose narcissism. And that's just like I said, normal trait. There's another form of narcissism, which we don't talk about as much in the normal world, but that's vulnerable narcissism. And these are the folks that are kind of think they're really important, think they should be getting a lot of attention, think they're the smartest people in the room, but no one really looks at them. No one pays attention to them. So they get insecure, they get depressed, their self-esteem drops. They think, why aren't I getting the attention I deserved? I'm kind of a legend. It's a legend in their own minds. So you're talking about this like basement narcissists,
Right.
living in their mom's basement, thinking how great they are and fantasizing about it. And those more vulnerable folks, you don't see at the bars as much because they're in the basement, but you see them clinically because they're depressed and they go see a clinician and say, help me out, I'm anxious. So those are the two normal forms of narcissism, their traits. And then there's this clinical form or psychiatric form called Narcissistic Personality Disorder. NPD. And that personality disorder form of narcissism is an extreme form of narcissism. You have a high level of it, like Trump or, a lot of probably celebrities or, academics. But you also, to make it a clinical disorder, you have to have that impairment we're talking about. So it has to be clinically significant impairment. And that's usually the narcissism is so bad, your marriage or your relationships are falling apart. Your work life could be falling apart. So sometimes you find narcissistic, really successful people in offices who are narcissists, but they kind of destroy the office culture. They're just bad workers. And so you can destroy that. You can make really poor decisions because your ego's so big. You just, overinvest in something and it just doesn't work out for you. So you start dysregulating your financial decisions. So you can make kind of those kind of mistakes. The big ones are usually interpersonal. But when you have that kind of impairment, it can be a disorder, and then you get treated for it.
The vulnerable personality disorder is fascinating.
Yeah.
That's a fascinating one because you see a lot of that on social media in particular, right? You see people that feel like they should be getting more attention than they are and don't understand why and feel upset by that or shortchanged.
Social media is such a strange beast because it gives everybody the chance to have a camera and have the audience of 1 billion people. So I could go on there and get a billion audience, but I have to earn that. And so you have lots of people that go, look, I can have 1 billion people in my audience, but I don't have those people. Why aren't they there? Who's screwing me over and not giving where are my followers?
Yeah.
Why aren't I getting the followers?
I saw a guy the other day talking about being shadow banned, and he had 1,000 friends. Yeah. And I'm like, are you sure?
Yeah.
Are you sure you're shadow banned? Are you sure people are just not interested in what you're saying?
Yeah, maybe you're just not that interesting.
But that's the weirdest thing to ever say. Like, I'm being shadow banned. Like, do you have evidence of this? Like, what is happening here?
Well, you're kind of an outlaw.
This is not saying that shadow banning is not real, but like people are using that as an excuse for why they're not getting the attention that they deserve.
Right. I would be the next Joe Rogan if it weren't for those dastardly shadow banners taking me down, holding me back.
They know that they can't silence me.
They can't. Yeah. That if I got out there, I would change the world, but these guys are holding me back. Yeah, and you can see how that turns into like a delusional system if you get, with sort of more schizophrenia where there's a whole world of people out there trying to hold me down.
Yeah, I want to get to that too. Yeah. I wanted to ask you if schizophrenia, we might as well get to it right now. Is there a connection between schizophrenia and narcissism? Because many people who are schizophrenic have these grandiose ideas of who they are or who they should be or where they fit in that are these ridiculously distorted perceptions of reality.
Yeah, so grandiosity you can see with narcissism, with I have this fantasy about how great I am, this illusion, but it's usually within the scope of reality. So if I'm talking to somebody narcissistic, they're like, I'm a 10, I'm pretty awesome. You're like, not really, man. You're just not, you're okay, but like maybe go back to the gym, but it's usually not, it's not crazy.
Right.
I was working in a hospital with a woman who was a patient who said that she was the tooth fairy. And she worked for Reagan as the tooth fairy. I thought, well, that's a grandiose delusion. Reagan wasn't president, but he was still helping her behind the scenes. That's a grandiose delusion, but you wouldn't call that narcissistic because she wasn't really, her personality was really narcissistic. She was more schizophrenic in her presentation, kind of flat affect, a little bit strange, odd or unusual, anhedonia, sort of lack of feeling and stuff, but those weird delusions. So you can have those grandiose delusions, but it's not quite the same as narcissism. It seems to be working a little differently. And the other place you see them is mania with like bipolar disorder. People get really manic and they get these manic phases and they're like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to build this. I'm going to take over this. My record's going to be the best. And that mania can look like narcissism too. And those are probably more closely linked.
The psychological disorders that we're aware of, the ones like narcissism, the ones like schizophrenia, like, do we know what's happening in the mind that causes a distortion of reality? Is it ego protecting you from the truth? Is it a chemical imbalance? Is it a series of things that all coincide? Like when you have someone who's both a narcissist and possibly schizophrenic.
With narcissism, it's very hard to detect anything that's sort of clearly biological, like and this is true for all personality, really. People have been looking at this last 5 years pretty hard for sort of biomarkers or neural structures. You don't really see them very clearly. You do with schizophrenia. There's some.
What is it with schizophrenia?
And I was going to say it's not my area, and I don't want to. I say, Jamie, if I say anything wrong, just check me and call me out because I don't want to screw up anything.
He's the best one-handed Googler on earth.
Please do that. Because there's that. There's the old stuff about kind of plaque in the brain and things like with Alzheimer's. You see some missing neural structure, but that's just out of my area.
I understand.
But with personality, you generally don't see it in there. You just can't find it so far. And when you look at genetics, you know it's in the genes, but there's no single genes. It's like a swarms of genes.
So it isn't. So if your father is a narcissist, are you more or less likely to be a narcissist?
More.
But what if you learn from your father? You're like, my God, my father's ruined his life. Like many alcoholics have children that won't touch liquor. and I've known quite a few of them.
Yeah. So in the clinical literature, they talk about that as sort of that you sort of identify with them, or you do the opposite of the father. So if the alcoholic father, like you said, and you become a teetotaler, or your father's a narcissist, you become really nice.
Yeah.
We don't really see that. What you tend to see, I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't happen because I know it happens, but what you tend to see in the literature with these big family studies is that traits like narcissism and all personality and really all mental disorders, they tend to follow family lines. So they're heritable. But it's not really clear how that happens.
So whether it's nurture or nature.
Right. I mean, it's in there, but we don't know exactly what the genes are. And when they start to look at the nurture question with a lot of personality, what you find is when they break these down into heredity coefficients, they don't mean exactly what they sound, but generally you find it's about 50-60% heritable. You're born with it, probably genetic, and maybe 10% is parenting, and maybe the other 30-40% is something in the environment that's just not really clear what it is.
The environment, really?
Yeah, just random environment. So that's why you have kids. And you have two. I have two daughters. They're very different people. Part of that's genetics, obviously. They're very different, but it's also their environment. I might have been a similar parent to both of them, but they have different friends. They grew up in a little different time, a little different culture, and all those forces affect you in ways you don't really understand. So a lot of what happens to us is this non-shared environment we just can't really explain. Parenting is pretty small.
Really?
Yeah, it's weird. What we say about parenting is that it really doesn't make much of a difference, but it matters. So, I have two daughters, and the idea that I could change them into the one into the other through my parenting skills. I could take my one daughter who loves to dance, and I could turn her into the one that loves, math, and I could take the math one and turn her into. No, I couldn't do that in a million years. They're just different people.
Yeah.
No way. So I can't really shape my kid's personality very well. I mean, parents just can't really do that. But you matter a lot. You put food on the table. You provide a safe environment. You're not threatening the kids. You're not. There's a lot you do as a parent that matters. But you can't really fine tune your kids' personalities very well.
Episodes of the Joe Rogan Experience are now free on Spotify. That's right, they're free. From September 1st to December 1st, they're going to be available everywhere. But after December 1st, they will only be available on Spotify, but they will be free. That includes the video. The video will also be there. It'll also be free. That's all we're asking. Just go download Spotify. Much love. Bye-bye.